Welcome to Authentic Educators. I'm Dave Brown, joined by my co-host Cody Crook, and we are both so excited to be joined by our second Anthony 2 weeks in a row, and another really good friend of mine. I can't even act like I don't know this man. Anthony Scornaienchi, our first health and PE guest on the podcast, so excited to hear about that world. And before we learn anything about you, Anthony, my first question is your last name, Scornaienchi. How many vowels is in that name?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. My kindergarten teacher called me Anthony Alphabet because she didn't know how to spell my last name and didn't know how to pronounce it. So there's a lot of letters, there's a lot of vowels, and for all intents and purposes, my students just revert to Mr. S.
And that's an Irish name, right?
Yes, very Irish, heavily
Cool.
rooted in Irish.
Why don't Anthony tell us, and I'm going to call you AJ because that's what I know you as. AJ, why don't you tell our guests about your background? You've been teaching for 15 years at this point, correct?
Yeah, so I'm on my 15th year, and thank you guys so much for having me on here. It's a pleasure and an honor. So a little bit about me. I got out of college around 2010, 2011. This was right after, on the recovery side of the real estate crash of 2008. And when we were getting out of college, they were telling us that jobs were very hard to get. That it was going to be very challenging as a teacher and as a young educator to get a job, and that we should be thinking about, as many certifications and as many things that you can get to make yourself as marketable. So graduating in a very volatile time and a very tense time as a teacher, because you've been told for so long that it's such a secure job and it's always going to be in demand. And coming out of the tail end or of that crash, that market crash, it was quite the adventure. I started off substitute teaching and then quickly found myself my first actual teaching job at an alternative school in Philadelphia, to which my first day that I was there, the lead administrator at the time, I was a young 22-year-old, and the administrator at the time walked up to me and said, "Do you know how old you can be to go to alternative school in Philadelphia?" And I said, "No, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, some of these students are allowed to go here until the age of 25." And he said, "You're 22. Don't tell anybody your age. The only reason you're going to pass for older is because of the bald head." So it was quite the experience, going into an environment where I was teaching people that were my age or slightly older. Fast forward from that, I landed a job at a charter school, and actually had the opportunity to work alongside my sister, who was an educator at the time, and had a wonderful experience. I ended up being the lead health and phys ed teacher, the sports director, the softball coach, the girls basketball coach, and just, sort of engulfed myself into the culture of the school. And then, the last couple years, I've been sort of bouncing around Bucks County public school districts, and have found myself happily, really happily at Pennsbury School District. So I've done, a long stint in Philadelphia. I was also in between that. I did 10-year stint at Philadelphia Public Schools, and then now, out in the Bucks County burbs.
That's awesome. And you've really taught all different grades. You've taught elementary, middle, high school. You've coached. You mentioned being an AD, charter school, alternative school, public school, urban setting, suburban setting. So you've really have actually a wealth of experience. And I'm sure there's so, and me knowing so much about you and your adaptive education background, we probably could talk about lots of other cool things in the future in terms of your experiences. But today, the focus, you told Cody and I before we hit record that there was a book you read a few years ago called The Gap and the Gain. And there is something that you've been implementing in your class that when you told Cody and I about this, our first reaction was, man, this
Click
seems like
record.
hit record. Let's hit record, and it felt like this could happen in any class, and it's really cool that it's happening with you and your health and PE classes. So why don't you talk about that idea and maybe give us a plug for the book?
Yeah, so before I get into that too, I did neglect, and thanks, Dave, for bringing that up, the adapted side of things. So when I talk about this point, I do want to recognize that this can be applied to all grade levels, and to all different styles of teaching, from regular education to special education. I use this So right now, currently, I'm sort of a hybrid teacher. I teach adapted phys ed at the middle school of one of Pennsbury school districts middle schools, and then I'm at the high school with ninth grade health, and I'm also teaching juniors and seniors PE up there. So I really have a hybrid and a really long range of different types of students that this is applicable to. So understand that this can and should be applied to all of the students that you come into contact with at any point in your career. And I believe in this so much. I am extremely passionate about this. So when I tell you that the difference and the results that this can produce in your classroom and the culture that it can cultivate among students, not only personally in how they view themselves, but the experience that they get from your classroom, it can be super impactful. The book is called The Gap and the Gain, and it's by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And really, the title sort of highlights two different types of mindsets, right? And two different ways of thinking about life, and specifically in your individual life or the individual student's life, progress and what that means to them. A gap mindset is a person who is always stuck measuring themselves against an ideal. And in the book, they illustrate that the ideal, they give the example that if you're in a boat and you're looking at the horizon, right? And you say, well, I want to make a goal to get to that point of the horizon. Well, what happens when you get to that point of the horizon and your
Yeah.
goal is essentially achieved, but what happens to the horizon?
New Horizon
It's a new horizon. The horizon
on
never
loop.
ends. So you get into this trap of, well, I got to this goal, but the horizon moved. The goalpost moved, right? No, now I got to get to this goal and I'll be happy. And now I got to get to this goal and I'll get happy. And then you find yourself, at a sense of eventually, and what most students find themselves at is a sense of burnout and a sense of like, man, every time I get to this where I think I'm going to be happy, or when I accomplish this goal, I'm going to find happiness. It's just another goal ahead of me.
Are you talking all person, like academic and emotional and athletic and social, or is
All
it
of it.
more of a folk? Okay, all of it.
All of it
I
can be
assumed, but I wanted to
applied.
clarify.
Yeah, and it can be applied to all aspects. And I encourage my students to apply this to every single aspect. Now, depending on what class you're in, so, if I'm in a PE class, it's more PE derived from, their goals and more physical education. If they're in, my ninth grade health class, I love it the most because ninth grade health covers such a specific uh, group of topics for health and wellness, everything from addiction and depression and mental health
Hmm.
to studies in sexuality and things like that, where to have this sort of mindset at a time in your life where you're questioning so many things and you're not sure about so many things, it can be the make or break situation for how you view yourself,
Okay.
and how you view yourself in the world, to others. So getting back to my point, when we are in a gap mindset, we're constantly viewing what could be or what is next. The gain mindset is actually, and I will physically have my students stop and look backwards. And I say, like, well, what happens when you start looking backwards at your past? And what does your past represent? And your past represents progress and all the things that you've accomplished up until today.
Mm.
And the whole preface or the whole point of the book is to be in a gain mindset. And the only way that you can be in a gain mindset is if you always measure backwards. So I am teaching my students that they need to measure backwards from the progress that they've had. This can be in the last 24 hours. It can be in the last 24 days. And I encourage them to think about all of that progress, and that there is no such thing, and we call them wins, right? So I have all of my students in ninth grade from day one, every single day that we get into class. It's sort of the instant start activity that I have them do. And they come in and they know that they have to open up their win journal and they have to log in 3 wins from the last time that I saw them. And it's 3 wins in their life. And they can't judge themselves on these wins. So these wins could be as um, small and as as like, hey, I only had to hit snooze on my alarm clock 2 times today, and I
Hmm.
Yeah.
actually made it to school on time. That's a win for me.
So win doesn't have to be transformational, but it can be small, and the small wins added up are transformational.
Exactly. And and it can be transformational. It can be
Good.
that, hey, I just got done my, SAT prep class, and I scored, my scores are off the charts, and I am just feeling so elated about that. Or I got first chair in band, and this is something I've been working for years on getting.
How
The
often do you see the kids? You mentioned every time you see them.
Yeah, so I see them if I'm seeing them for a semester, or I'm sorry, for a marking period straight, it's every day.
Okay.
If I'm seeing them for a semester length, it's every other day. So it's more of like an A-B schedule.
So literally, if I'm a student in AJ's class or Mr. S's class with lots of vowels and consonants, every 24 hours, I'm thinking of 3 wins.
Yeah, and not only that, with that, I'm on my board every single day, and I purposely erase it so that I have to come back the next day and write it back up again. Is that
Yours.
I start every class with always measure backwards, always measure backwards. And what I'm trying to do, we live in
What do you mean by that? Sorry, like you're writing those words?
Oh, yes, I'm writing always measure backwards. So I want the students to be able to look at that board and see that every day and see that I'm actually writing that so that they know that they need to measure if they're gonna, if they're gonna pit themselves up against standards and ideals, that they need to measure backwards, and that's how they measure the true value of themselves.
It's so cool.
So
It really is. I'm like, I want to go to school and have you as my teacher for ninth grade health because I think it's so cool, the mental health end of things and the sort of mindset. And I don't know if that's your school or if that's a you bringing it. So kudos to either you or to the school. That's really unique and important. I think a lot of kids aren't exposed to that. They just kind of go to school and like, all right, we're doing what we got to do. Like,
Well, that's the thing is like I think it's most impactful for students because if you think of a high school year from ninth grade to 12th grade, it's these massive milestones that students have in their head, right? Like to get from start of freshman year to end of senior year, to get that diploma, to get everything, they have this ideal in their head that this is going to be this huge monumental thing, and this is what everybody does, and there's such a high standard of expectation. I mean,
Yeah.
there are kids who are full blown getting themselves into panic attacks because they apply so much pressure to their life to be perfect in terms of
yeah,
their academia, in terms of their sports, in terms of their social life, in terms of all aspects of what school encompasses, right?
Isn't
So
your
you
school where the prom's crazy? Like the
it
expectation for
is.
senior prom is massive at your school?
unbelievable,
Like
unbelievable. Yeah,
internet, like
Like
national
John
stories have been written
Mayer
we're
about it.
literally
played,
considered
right?
the best prom in America.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did John Mayer play there like a decade
Oh,
ago?
it's been John Mayer. It's been bigger names than that. I mean, like rappers, like song artists, like really well-known people, right? So even that in and of it, and it's not even like you guys hear about that part. You should see the kids because they do like floats, like prom floats, that they
Wow.
float, like do actual built floats around town. So
So that's
that's
like a fun event, but there's probably just a ton of kids just putting so much pressure
unbelievable
on
amount.
themselves to sustain it, you
I
know?
mean, and it's a massive community builder. Like I don't want to put a bad note on it. It's there's
Yeah,
so
it's a good
much good
thing.
that comes from it,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of standards that come from it as well.
right.
And by far there is more good to it than there is bad, but we have to
Sure.
take note. And that's just one small example, right? I want to get back to a student focusing, ninth grade year, getting into it and getting to the end of their 12th grade year. And they go, what do you get? Congratulations. Here's your diploma. And here's another 4 years of going to college and having to do all this all over again.
Yeah.
And the kid gets to the end and they're like, holy crap, like that was so much work. Like, and it's great. Like I had my grad party and everything, but like what now? And like, how do I value myself now that that's all over?
Well,
Well,
there's a new horizon, right? Like there's
right.
a
Well, here's 4 more years of that. And then what happens? And then here's 4 more years, and they get to a point where, and the students nowadays, in 14 years of teaching, the students nowadays there's a different type of awareness with our students. They are more self-aware. They are more aware. Like I think about myself in context of a ninth grader now today, and like I didn't have, and I don't know if it's technology, I don't know if it's the internet and exposure to things, but I do see a level of awareness, a higher level of awareness with students these days. And they are thinking like, well, what does all this get me? Well,
Yeah.
how do I value myself after all this is done? And who's there? And, I've done all this hard work and I've busted my butt and I've gotten these GPA and I've got for what? For another 4 years and they're starting to question this. And I'm like, well, that's gap mindset. Like you're not valuing, you're not placing your value in the right spot. And if you were just place your value, take it out of the gap and put it into the gain mindset.
Yeah. How do you
What
flip that? Can you like talk us through how you would have that convo with a student?
Right. So I immediately have to sit them down and be like, you have the wrong mindset, and I'm going to show you why. And I talk to them about that ship, right? That horizon. When we go into the gain mindset, this oftentimes can take, you can have the short bursts of dopamine where you're like, well, measure what's the biggest thing that you've accomplished in the last 20 days? And what did that look like? Let's walk me through start to finish of that. And they'll start to talk about, their lives and that they, it was the last football game. If it's an athlete, right? It was the
Hmm.
last football game that they were in, and they've really been trying to, if it's a track and field person, they've really been trying to shave a few seconds off of that last, quarter mile run, right? And here's what they've been doing, and I'm like, well, what was the process of that? And they're like, well, actually, it was really hard. And it's getting them to acknowledge that they can do really hard things and that they can build themselves up to a better, improved version of themselves. And that the real win comes from the experience of that rather than you crossing the finish line and shaving that little bit of time off. That's great and everything, but you have to measure backwards to realize and appreciate everything and all of the effort and all of the time and all of the discipline that took. And I'm like, wow, you're actually a really disciplined person, because a
Yeah.
person to shave off, 0.02 seconds on your time is a lot. That's a huge amount in the grand scheme of track and field and
Yeah.
running, right?
Yeah.
And like, do you think an undisciplined person could do that? And they'd say, well, no. And I'd say, so you are acknowledging that you're a very disciplined person, and that takes a great amount of effort and concentration. And they go, well, yeah, I guess so. That does, Mr. S. And I'm like, well, how do you feel right now? And they're like, actually feel really good. Like and I said, well, why don't you write that down, what we talked about? And why don't you read that, right the last 10 minutes before you go to bed, instead of being on your cell phone, why don't you just read what we talked about and have that discussion and let me know how you feel in the morning.
Do they have a physical journal that they do this in?
I keep a digital journal, so it's on a Google sheet,
Okay.
or yeah, a Google Doc. And it's something where the reason that I have them do that is because um,
Control F.
right, and let's be honest, right? Like it's like sort of a fight it or flow with it situation, and students are on their cell phones all the time. And if they can have that Google Doc there and they can go into that Win Journal even before, during, or after my time with them, I want it to
Hmm.
be as accessible and as easy as possible. And
Yeah.
in order to develop a habit, you have to have the path of least resistance to cultivate that habit, or else it's never going to stick.
Right.
To be honest, to validate that, like I keep a folder in my Google Drive for every year that I journal in a few times a month, and that's how I access. And I love that I could look at like my reflection for 2023 right now if I wanted to. It's a lot easier than searching for a journal. So thinking about that kid at night on their phone, they could actually maybe they are in a bad spot mentally and they need to get a win and read their wins and remember that, oh yeah, I can do hard things and I have had
Well,
success.
and to go off of that, to piggyback off of that, D, when's the hardest time in a human's brain? What emotional state is the hardest time for you to recall a memory? Do you know? Does anybody know?
I want to
When is it the
know.
hardest?
Is it like
Wait,
anger or depression
hold
or
on. Let me get a
Stress and
guess to.
anxiety.
stress
The
and
Ah,
hardest
anxiety?
time for you to recall a memory in your life is when you have elevated levels of stress and anxiety. Well, when you have elevated levels of stress and anxiety, and you know now that you have a journal that you can go back to, and you basically have a pep talk in a
a
journal
reset.
back,
Yeah.
and you're resetting your mind, and you are training your brain to combat anxiety and stress through your own progress and your own wins. And that is such a powerful tool for
Yeah.
anybody who's dealing with anything at any point in time.
So for listeners hearing this, and I'm in that boat because I've never read this book, and the mindset, when I hear that word mindset, I go to growth, and I feel like this is a derivation of that. Um, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Like you could, as a teacher, once you explain it and once you get the system in place, which I can't imagine is going to take more than 5 to 8 consecutive days of consistency. Like you could do this in a minute, right? Like they open their journal and just bang, 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 right? Like if you
Oh,
wanted
it's
to, or
It's done exactly. And it's so instilled in them by day 8 to 10 that you're not even prompting them at a point.
It
They're
just
just coming in, sitting down, and they know that they have to get that done. It's done. And here's the other part. And I know I want to be conscious of time and everything. When you get to that point, you then get to include it in instant activity. So I have them do this game called back to back, and I never let my students, my ninth grade students, sit for more than 18 minutes.
okay.
Every 18 minutes, there's an alarm that goes off, and they know that they have to get up, and we're going to do the back-to-back game. The back-to-back game is very simple. I play music on the whiteboard and the smartboard, and while the music's playing, they have to walk around, and they cannot follow anybody. They have to walk independently. When the music stops, they have to go back-to-back with the closest person to them. When they go back to back, they turn, they acknowledge each other, they shake their hands, they pound each other, and they have to go into their wins that they've discussed and talk about. And here's where the magic really happens.
Oh, this is so cool. This is
Not
so cool,
only
AJ.
not only are you having students take a brain break, but during that brain break, they are getting vulnerable with each other, and they are talking about deep, personal, intimate parts of their lives. And
Wow.
you have to give the perspective of a ninth grader, right?
Yeah, yeah,
A deep personal intimate part could be the fact that, hey, I'm getting to school earlier now because I'm hitting my alarm clock or my snooze button less on my alarm clock, and like my relationship with my parents has gotten better in the morning. That's monumental to a 14-year-old. The
I'm going
fact
to
that
bed without looking at my phone or
I'm going to
something
bed
like.
without looking at my phone. I've reflected for 10 minutes. I've woken up on time. I didn't get into the argument with my mom about being late all the time, and I actually got here and I feel great about myself.
Wow.
And you're having
And
such positive peer-to-peer interaction there too. So you're like modeling really good peer relationships, which is cool because they get a lot of negative and sorry to cut you off, but
No, it's and the whole part about that is, and they know that they're going to be, and I bear no buts about it. Like, it's time to air our dirty laundry here. So like I'll call on Cody and I'll be like, Cody, what was one of Dave's wins? And talk to me about that and why that, had an impact on Dave. And they know that they're responsible
So they got to
for,
listen.
they have to actively listen, and they have to actively digest that win and be able to talk about it and express it back to the classroom in a sense that's going to make sense for Cody talking about Dave's life and giving
Yeah.
perspective off of Dave's life. And when you do that, you're instantly having the class and the students, the Cody and the Dave relationship develop a level of respect that wasn't there otherwise, if
Yep.
not otherwise prompted to do it in that sequence and order of events.
Yep.
And you're seeing friendships being cultivated, and respect equals vulnerability, respect equals acceptance, respect equals so many things in the sphere of a high school dynamic, right? And not even that, it just respecting somebody means that you're acknowledging them and that you actually listen to them. And sometimes all it takes for a person having a crappy day is to be acknowledged and to be listened to.
One of my things that is, I think, an asset of mine and a weakness is I get sometimes bogged down with logistics. And thinking like as a listener, yeah, I want to do this. I'm assuming you got an odd number of kids, it's just back to back to back type deal. Like, hey, it's a group of three, whatever.
Right.
Is that how you handle it?
Exactly. So if there's an odd
Okay.
number of kids, just go back to back with the closest group, your group of three. We don't spend the part about it that logistical part is, um, you have to understand that this is going to be, and not that you have to understand, the way that I look at this is that this is going to impact them. This could impact them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
yeah.
And if anybody's, I say this jokingly, but there also is a level of truth to it. But like it's like, to me it's like, you know this, I joke and I say, tell your math teacher that you're never going to use the Pythagorean theorem outside of your one-letter class.
But your
But you're
win
going to be
journal.
able, this you'll be able to apply to every aspect of your life for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So to me, it's, when logistically speaking, I really try to, and I know teachers' brains work that way because they're like time chunking and this, and we got to get this
Yep.
done and get this done. And I'm like,
Yep.
this is more important than anything else that I can give to
And if
these.
you work in like a middle school or any place where there's a team setting and you're really like bogged down into the minutia of your curricular minutes, hey, social studies does it on Monday, English does it on Tuesday. So they're winning every day somewhere.
Right.
I know high school does, it doesn't really work like that because of the schedules there, but it's like this idea, man, is so flexible and it's so powerful. And you could make it a half a period, you could make it geez, like
Yeah,
I
what
just
I was just say, what's sticking out to me that I love about this too is that it could be a full lesson in and of itself, but it could also be a 1 minute thing. And it could also be like you could do it for, you mentioned math. It could be like look back to the past week at like an improvement you've had with like this equation or this lesson, this unit that we're learning, or with public
yeah.
speaking in an English class, or with art, something in an art class, or literally any class this could apply to. And I fully agree with you, AJ, that like this applies to everything in life. And it reminds me of the book Mindset. It reminds me of the book Atomic Habits. And I just had there's this through line that Cody and I have realized about all of these episodes we do. We find that we somehow always come back to building relationships and social emotional learning. I imagine you've learned so much about kids also from doing this.
Yeah, is there any
Correct me
like
if I'm wrong.
highlight moment where you can, obviously without a specific child's name, but can you think back to the time you've been doing this and like pinpoint this is valid because of some, and if you can't, the idea itself stands on its own merits, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so and it's actually, this is funny. So I've taught a student now. So this is my third year at Pennsbury. And I have a collegiate D1 athlete, a girl who's a lacrosse player. And she messed up her health grade her freshman year, so they put her sophomore year into my health class. So she was a bit of a outcast in terms of like the grade knew that she didn't belong there. She was older. She had to redo this. She didn't
Mm-hmm.
get it done for summer school, and she knew that she had to get it done, in order to improve her GPA, so on and so forth. Um, I have had this student in the capacity of teaching her every year since that class. So I had her for the ninth grade health in her 10th grade year,
Mm-hmm.
11th grade PE, and 12th grade PE. And I've developed quite the relationship with her. And she a couple months ago, she came to me and when I said to her like, "Hey, you're going to a D1 school, like, yeah, how exciting should that be? Like and on top of that, she's D1 lacrosse. She's got a full or three-quarters of a paid scholarship. Like, this girl's
Wow.
going places with her sport and her athletics. On top of that, she's a brainiac. She's one of the brightest students that I've ever had conversations with. And you guys, I'm sure you guys have those students where like you just connect on such an intellectual level, and they are so beyond their years and their awareness in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, she comes to me and she was like, "Hey, I just want to let you know that like for a really long time, I was not considering continuing lacrosse." And I was just so burnt out from it because it's my parents have just shoved it down my throat. Her older
Mm-hmm.
brother is at a D3 school and is a lacrosse player.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I am just so like, I got so resentful from it because so much of my identity felt like it had to do with a stick and a lacrosse ball. And I was just so over it. And she said that she was 2 seconds away from pulling out of the athletic scholarship. And she came across her win journal, and she looked at her win journal, and so much of it had to do with how she was feeling good about herself through the success of lacrosse, and what that those memories had done for her as she was reading through from her 10th grade year, 11th grade year. And she realized that without lacrosse, some of the most deeply intimate relationships and friendships that she had wouldn't have existed. She realized
Wow.
that the connection that she had with her brother, and the
Yeah.
depth of their relationship would have probably not been as deep because they have bonded so much over that. And the fact that she was able to look back, and as much as she felt resentful about it, I think that she was just at a point where she had forgotten that she was supposed to be measuring backwards, and that she
That
was
wind journal.
that looming next 4 years of what D1 athletics looked like was scaring the crap out of her and was messing with her head, and her goals were so skewed because she just kept moving that goalpost that she forgot to look back. And when she said she did that, she said
Wow.
she felt a rush of warmth over her, and so that she felt so different about what, because of what athletics and specifically what lacrosse had done for her high school career, what the possibilities could be for her in her college years.
if I'm a listener, I'm like, did they pre-plan that question and story? And
And then
the
no, that was
honest
like, yeah,
answer is no.
No.
I just asked AJ that now. He pulled that out. We didn't press pause.
no,
It's like it's so amazing. I just want to share a quick like tangent because you're talking about college athletes, and when I was at Bucknell University, I was on the crew team, and you're talking about gain and the gain and the I'm
the gap
blanking
in the
on it.
game, the
Gap,
gap
right?
in
The
the
gap in the
game.
gain. And one of the things that was so unique about crew when you're talking about the horizon and being in a boat is when you're rowing, the coxswain's the only person looking forward. And so when you're in a race with crew, you are watching where you came from. And so I feel like, I'm going to have to reach out to my college buddies about this because, like, literally that sport is that book,
Right.
right? It's you have no idea, you can kind of look to the left and right and see where the other boats are in proximity to you, but it's all about where you have been, right? Like I ran 13 miles the other day and oh, I didn't run 14 or I didn't run 15. But then when I look back, I'm like, man, mile 2, that was hard. Mile 3, like this is, this is our Dave, our 37th episode, I think.
Yeah.
And, AJ, from the bottom of my heart, like, this is one of my favorite ones. And, if I don't implement it tomorrow, I need to plant that seed of implementing it next year. Absolutely. And building that culture with my students. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
And
welcome. Yeah. So guys, just to tie a bow on it, and this was something that when she showed me this, I literally teared up in front of her. Like it's probably a handful of times that I've ever actually
Oh,
cried in front of a student.
absolutely.
So she's talking to me about this in the gym, and you know how lacrosse players have their stick in their backpack like that. And she pulls her stick out, and the rubber butt end of the bottom of the stick, she shows it to me like that, and on the circle part of it right here, the rubber butt end is AMB. So she put always measure backwards on the bottom of her stick.
Oh,
So
I was
that was
predicting WIN, but I like AMB too.
yeah, always measure
yeah,
backwards.
whoa.
And that was just like I was like
That's
tears.
it.
I was
That's
like,
it.
that's it, man. It was waterworks. So I gave her a
Wow.
big hug and I told her that, that she needs to apply this to not only athletics but the rest of her life. And it was a moment. It was definitely a moment. It was one of the highlights of my definitely my time at Pennsbury, but probably one of my all-time moments of my career as a teacher.
If it's happening with her, it's happening with other kids, right? It might not be as, you might not know about it as much. It's happening though.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the hope. And I believe in it so much. Like I prescribe it to my life every single day. My wife and I do three
When
wins after dinner. We do not leave the table until we do our three wins. That is the rule of our relationship. So, just for the listeners out there, for the teachers out there, this not only is applicable to your classroom, but it's applicable to your life. And I encourage you and I challenge you to do that in both aspects of your career and also your personal life and just give it some time. But see, you will feel change. You will feel better about yourself. And you'll start to believe in it. And once it, has that impact on that student or even on yourself, like you're never going to look at life the same way again. You're always going to be measuring backwards.
awesome. Dave, you
That
want to bring
is,
us out?
I was going to say that is the perfect place to end. I don't want to a million things to say, but that is the bow on this. So Anthony, AJ, thank you so much, and I agree with all the sentiments Cody said. Honestly, just inspiring, amazing stuff. And as always, thank you to our listeners for listening to Authentic Educators, a podcast for teachers by teachers about best lessons, favorite classroom moments, and strategies you can implement today. AJ, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.